Rocky playing with Dad. We just got home from Halt. And Rocky's getting his first belly rub. And he's finding that big old nose of Dad's and loving every minute of
You
it.
keep saying big old nose.
Look at that happy Dad. Yeah. Look at that beautiful baby.
So you ready to go to America?
Yeah, he's a big old guy. Look at this. Oh. There he is, playing with
Tell me
Dad.
something? What do you want to do? You want to turn over? Oh, I know you want to say something.
What do you want to say, Dad?
So do we look alike just like we thought?
You look exactly alike.
Someone told me we look alike because we both don't have hair.
He's got more hair than you do.
Oh!
Yeah. Okay.
That video was taken in South Korea in 2001. That's me behind the camera, filming my husband, Paul Friedman, as we spent our first few minutes alone with our beautiful new son, Richard Harry Hyun-soo Friedman, AKA Rocky. We were over the moon about becoming parents. That short clip reflects how we spent the whole night, just adoring and staring at our 4-month-old miracle. The next morning, we boarded a plane back to Boston to start our new lives as a family. Our parents and siblings met us at the airport. When we arrived home, the house had been decorated with banners and balloons to welcome us back. It was one of the happiest days of my life. Paul was a consultant and he traveled a lot, but he'd arranged to work from Boston for the next few months. I took a 3-month maternity leave from my psychology practice to bond with Rocky and settle into motherhood. On the Monday I returned to work, Paul played hooky to spend the day with the baby. We lived next door to a playground, but Paul was more comfortable with an overpriced cup of coffee in his hand than sitting in a sandbox, so he took Rocky to Starbucks and read him the New York Times. When I got home, it was clear that they'd both had had a wonderful day. After dinner, Paul got a call saying he had to fly out to California the next morning. We were disappointed, but it was a sign that life was returning to what we expected would be our new normal. The next morning, Rocky and I waved goodbye to Daddy as he got in the cab to take him to the airport. He always called when he was seated on the plane and again when he landed, so I knew I'd speak with him soon. Rocky and I got ready for our day, starting with a swim at the Y. On the way home, my phone rang. It was Paul's boss, Mark. Had I heard the news, he asked. No, we'd been singing with Elmo. Then he told me. American Flight 11, bound for Los Angeles, had crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. What are you talking about? I asked. Maybe Paul missed the plane, he said. People miss planes all the time. Not Paul. Paul was on that flight. I'd spoken to him while he was waiting to take off. The feelings part of my brain shut down. I drove home in the breakdown lane. My only thought was to get the baby home safely. Once home, I turned on the news and checked the itinerary Paul always taped to the fridge. I don't remember crying, or feeling, or breathing. Something was off about this story. Planes don't fly into buildings. One glance at the TV told me I was wrong. I felt myself slip into shock. All of a sudden, my wonderful husband was gone, and I was a widow with a 7-month-old baby. I needed air. Wally, our mailman, was across the street. Did you hear the news? He asked. I told him Paul was on that plane. I think we hugged, I'm not sure. But within 20 minutes, Wally had told the neighbors, and there were 10 people in my house. The people who showed up, uninvited and unapologetic, knew something I didn't know. I needed them. They took care of Rocky while I tried, mostly unsuccessfully because the phone lines were out, to call my parents, my sisters and brother, Paul's family, and the adoption agency. Then I called Paul's dentist to cancel his appointment on Monday at the end of the week. Our brains do funny things as they spin into insanity. It wouldn't have been too far off to call me and Paul loners, happy hermits. We had friends we loved, but the word community wasn't part of our working vocabulary. Now, all of a sudden, community was thrust upon me. Thank goodness I didn't have the emotional or physical energy to resist. Within days, my town mobilized to take my small, broken family under its protective wing. I want to share a few examples of the kinds of community I experienced. For days after 9/11, my house was full of people. Again, I hadn't invited any of them, but they showed up for an endless makeshift shiva, Jews and non-Jews, friends, family, and co-workers. I was confused and terrified about the future, and they were a distraction from thoughts and feelings I wasn't ready to face. I didn't know what to do with my body, my container, while my brain and heart tried to make sense of the impossible. I called Paul's cell phone 20 times a day just to hear his voice. Unable to sleep, I listened to talk radio all night. Hello to Paul from Minnesota. Maybe Paul had survived and was in Minnesota. Maybe I was going mad. American Airlines, the Salvation Army, the Red Cross, and other organizations called with offers of financial assistance and emotional support. American Airlines assigned me 2 care workers. I don't remember this, but I later learned that I refused to take their calls for a couple of weeks. They persisted, and when I finally accepted their support, they were the ones who knew best how to sit with me in my grief and often stayed late into the night. One of those workers, Annie, remains one of my most treasured friends, even though she was instructed not to form a relationship with the client. But some rules are meant to be broken. We needed each other to get through a tragedy that impacted us in very different ways. Annie and I bonded at the heart. Over the next 12 months, hundreds of cards and handmade gifts arrived from all over the world. I have an attic full of carefully preserved blankets, stuffed animals, knitted baby sweaters, and other precious items of love and support from total strangers. I wrote over 1,200 thank you notes. At the risk of sounding hyperbolic, those thank you notes kept me alive. I couldn't eat or sleep, but I could write thank you notes to strangers who knew I needed them. For a whole year, my garbage pails were magically transported from the curb back to my garage on pickup days. Dinner appeared regularly on my doorstep, sometimes with a signed card, but just as often with no clue to the donor's identity. Once, an acquaintance who knew I was Jewish drove 4 towns over to a kosher restaurant to bring us a chicken dinner. I don't keep kosher and I'm a vegetarian, so the poignancy of her effort was especially sweet. I went back to work 8 days after Paul died. I knew that if I didn't hold on to something that had not been destroyed by the events of 9/11, I would crumble just like those buildings. I got home from work late most nights. By the time I picked Rocky up from his daycare provider, it was often after 9. One winter night, I climbed the icy steps of my front walk, tired baby in my arms, hungry and wiped out to the core. I noticed a police car with its lights on across the street. I didn't have the energy to care. About 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. It was the cop. He was young and looked nervous. He'd been sitting in that car since 6 p.m. waiting for me to come home. He had come to tell me that the New York Police Department had found Paul's wedding ring. He said that a week or so earlier, some New York firefighter or city worker sifting through the rubble of the World Trade Center had bent down and picked up a tiny, battered piece of metal. It would have been so easy for him or her to brush it away with the rest of the debris, but that person took it to a supervisor who checked with the DNA sample I had sent. They confirmed the barely legible inscription on the inside of the ring with the report submitted by the FBI agents who had been to my house weeks earlier. And now, in what seemed like the ultimate kindness, a local police officer had waited outside my door for 3 hours in 20-degree weather to deliver this news to me in person. To top it off, he then sat on my living room carpet and played with Rocky while I called my family. I'll never know who found Paul's ring, and I deeply regret that I didn't get that officer's name, or if I did, that I have long forgotten it. But 20 years later, I still think of them. For many months, my family and friends called me frequently. They did this over and over, despite knowing I might pick up the phone irrationally hopeless, jealous of their lucky lives, and almost certain to break down in tears at some point in the conversation. On Rocky's first birthday, the ones who lived locally showed up to celebrate and eat cake with us. And every year on 9/11, they came over to share a meal, to talk about Paul, and to make sure I knew they would never forget. To those friends and family who might be listening tonight, thank you. Thank you for the support and kindness you shared then, and for the lasting impact your love has had on my life. Do you remember all the flags that were flown for months after 9/11? Maybe they weren't flown down here, but in Massachusetts and in the tri-state area, they were everywhere. I felt like each one of those flags was hung to give me strength, to assure me that I was not alone. Experiencing community in these and many other ways, from family, friends, and neighbors, from fellow Americans, and from sympathetic people all around the world, changed who I was. I'm still a happy hermit at my core, but I'm a happy hermit who understands and believes in the power of community, of lending support even when it's not my responsibility to do so, and of opening myself up to the pain of others. I can bear it. And sometimes the simple act of bearing witness and showing up when someone is in need can sustain that person's sense of hope and humanity. Our country was different after 9/11. The tragedy brought us together in a way we hadn't experienced during my adult lifetime. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. But maybe, if we keep in mind what a positive and lasting impact community carries with it, and how it instills caring and hope in the people it touches, we will try a little harder tomorrow. Shana Tova and Shabbat Shalom.
Can I get you?